Hey everyone, my name is Chris, this is my whiteboard and welcome to Christacular. This is my official first video because the last one just doesn't count. And today I'm going to talk about the different models of the flow of time. I may have to split it in several videos depending on how much I can talk about it. So, I'll have to kill my friend here. First of all, I'm going to talk about a linear model of time flow, if you can call it that, where everything is set in past, present and future. So, I hope you guys can read that, it'll work out. So, this model is a piece of shit actually, because, well, everything has a set order. If you were to travel from the past to from the present to the past, you'd automatically eradicate everything, starting from the point in which you arrived in the past. So nothing here would exist anymore. But only if you consider that your presence in the past would alter the present and the future. There are several things to consider depending on what theory you want to go after. But if you consider that your presence in the past would not alter anything that comes beyond that point, I'm at a loss with words. I'll become a fluent in it. In my brain it works. Okay, so right now you've traveled from the present to the past. So if your presence in the past would alter the future times to come, then your present from which you've started to travel would disappear. But now that's where you have to really think about it, because if the present from which you originally came would disappear, that would sort of mean you would disappear as well. But you wouldn't, because you're not in that present anymore, you're in the past that influences the present. But that's only if you consider that your presence in the past would actually alter the future, or present and future in that case. But if you consider that fate always finds its way, if you can call it that, and everything is set to go in that order, everything that happened in the past before you were born will happen again, doesn't matter if you're there or not. Then you're kind of in the loop. That's where the loop comes in. So let's see, if this is where you're born, this is your lifespan, and from there you go back to the past. From the past on, you're going to live the time before you were born, and you're going to live parallelly with yourself from the moment you're born to the moment where the next you that was born travels back to the past. Now it is a loop, but you wouldn't eradicate yourself, I think. Yeah, it isn't even your loop, it's just a loop of all the versions of you that are to come. But only if you consider that everything happens as it has already happened and will happen. That sounds a bit complicated. It made a lot more sense in my brain. Anyways, that's the kind of bitch of a model that would be. So nothing here would exist anymore if you traveled from the present to the past, and your presence in the past would actually alter the future. So now you can debate whether or not you would actually have ever traveled to the past, or you would cease to exist the moment you hit the past. But if you consider that you stay in the past, you don't cease to exist in the past, then you're going to basically rewrite everything from that point on. the present is going to be completely new, as well as the future. Now it's debatable whether or not you will ever be even born, but you do already exist in a time. That sounds really complicated right now. I'm sorry. I will get better at this. So, in a model where your presence influences the flow of time, you could come to a future where you have never ever been born before, and nobody could might have invented time travel, but you exist in the past due to your time travel. Yeah, how would that even work? I'm sorry. These videos are basically annoying to watch. I know I might need to write a script. I'll get to it. For now, I'm just going to talk and try to articulate. Anyway. The dilemma we have here, whether or not you actually exist in the past, depends on whether or not you're going to see the flow of time only in one universe or strewn out through different parallel universes. But that's also another theory which I will come back to later. For now, if you consider that that the flow of time only exists in one world, there's only one world where we exist and past, present and future are set, then we actually I think we hit a paradoxon already. But is it also a paradoxon when it's the loop, as I've mentioned before, where past, present and future are set, where everything's predetermined? Well, it's a loop, but you're actually going to live past that loop at some point. Once you've hit the present, where you travel back to the past, you outlive your current version of self in that time flow. Or, well, not outlive, but you pass them in the flow of time. Also, you can live, well, parallelly to each other in the same time, but you wouldn't be the same person. Or would that lead to another paradoxon, where when you meet yourself, you're going to rip the whole space-time continuum apart? I'm sorry for the many quiet moments, but okay. That's kind of a mess right now. I'm sorry. I might have to repeat myself a few times because I actually don't want to re-record everything. But to make it clear what we've already said. So the first one is where past, present and future are all dependent on one another, and no matter what happens in the past, you wouldn't influence it. You could go back and kill Hitler, he would survive in some way, you wouldn't be able to do it because it already happened. It will happen. That's what I wanted to say. Now, if we say that everything is codependent on one another, we can actually assume that time is a loop or a circle. It closes in on itself. That only makes sense once you go into the several eternities later, actually. But if the past events alter the present events, determine the future events, and so on, you have to have a start and a finish, which are so close to one another that they actually influence one another already. So everything that happened in the past will happen in the new past. I think that has something to do with the 10 or 14-fold theory. I'm gonna have to rewatch that video a lot, that one. Anyway, so I have a lot of pens right now. So if everything's set and you travel to the past, nothing would happen. You would enter a loop where from the moment where you're born, two of you would exist in the same timeline. Because the timeline is set. Nothing can change that timeline here. So, what would you do if you would actually meet yourself? Would you then maybe cease to exist? Would only the meeting with yourself alter the present or future? So that, no, you're you in the same universe, on the same flow of time, but from a different time. Ideas. Past, present, future. I'm actually completely forgetting the future. Oh, new idea. Okay, let's ignore the loop from past and present right now and focus a bit on the future. Oops. Sorry. Because a lot of people would only travel to the past, and I don't know why. I think the future is more interesting because you don't know anything about that part of time yet. So, if you were to travel to the future, what would happen? Honestly, there are several things to consider. Now, the set time stream, would you create a second version of you that travels to the future, and the original version or whatever version of you actually lives on and lives that time? Or would you disappear from the present and reappear in the future? Which one would it be, honestly? You can consider both things, since time travel is not real yet. So, if you go from the present to the future, would that even be possible? You see, recently I've been listening to a podcast called PARADOXICA, and it's an amazing podcast. You should go listen to it, and without spoiling too much, it's about a scientist who wanted to create a machine that let things float, but she accidentally traveled through time back to the 1940s. Now, not at first, but she only can travel to the past, and also only to specific anchor points, which I don't really know much about. That's something artificially created anchor points where her timepiece draws her to, if you can call it that. I'm sorry. So she can only travel to the past and not to the future. To the future, it's not possible, but I don't know why, or maybe she'll figure that out later. I haven't listened to all that much yet. Okay, but yeah, that was a little product placement without payment. Anyway, if you ignore present and past and just go to the future, how would you find out if you existed from present to future, or if you disappeared in the present? I mean, you could go and ask your relatives or whatever, depending on how far into the future you go. Also, I don't think that would throw you in a loop, because the future hasn't happened yet, although it probably already has happened, if time is a loop itself. Now, if you met yourself in the future and it was some dystopian shithole, and your future self told your present self to go back to the present/past to change a few things, that wouldn't be possible here. You could try, but it's already set in stone. But it would work with a different time model, one where that I'm actually going to talk about later, but I'm also going to talk about one where every millisecond exists consecutively right next to each other and has a billion different branches, depending on every little bit that influences the situation. And also a time model where time exists as itself as a whole, but throughout different parallel worlds or parallel universes. whatever you want to call it. Now, with the parallel worlds, you also gotta think about whether or not it's the first time model where everything is set, or if it's the one where every decision creates a new branch or numerous branches, depending on how many decisions you could make at that moment. And that's a lot. Where was I going with this? I mean, if you consider that everything, that it's a linear time model with past, present, future in a set order. But if you think about the one where you can influence the flow of time depending on your decisions, you could actually go back to the past from the future, the present from the future, and change it. Then this future wouldn't exist, but the new one. Now you can argue whether or not you would have... I'm sorry, I think one of the dogs causing some ruckus right now. Okay, when this future ceases to exist, you could actually argue whether or not you would have actually traveled back to the present or ever actually traveled to the future, since the future there would never have existed. So you couldn't have met yourself, you couldn't have given yourself some orders to change the present, to alter the future. That's one of the big paradoxes actually, if you have ever traveled through time, if everything's changed. So I really don't like this model of the flow of time. Goodbye pen, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't like this model because there are so many paradoxa. It's just not my friend. The other ones are a lot more fun to consider, but this one's also fun if you really want to talk about the time travel in different movies and books and so on. Because there you can argue whether or not everything was set to happen the way it did, or if it could be changed, or if it is a loop or a paradoxon. Yeah, that's the first one I wanted to talk about, and I've already talked a bit about the others, so I'm sorry, this is a bit chaotic still. I'll try to get better at it. Yeah. It's a little bit, but honestly. Am I allowed to curse? I don't know. Oh well. So this is it for the first time model, and I hope I see you in the next videos. Bye!